Well, guys, it is time to talk about the top 10 2000s Transformers figures I picked up in 2024. So, just as an overview, when I say figures that came out in the 2000s, that would be Beast Machines, Armada, Robots in Disguise 2001, Energon, Cybertron, Animated, Movie 1, Alternators, Universe, Classics. I think it's even Revenge of the Fallen is in that group as well. There's a whole lot of series, some of the best series of all time, that came out in the 2000s. And this is also the period in which I was a child. I was growing up. A lot of these are childhood toys, or toys that I wanted as a kid. And you can also probably tell this is going to be one of the biggest pools of figures that we have to talk about when it comes to top 10s. I think I got more figures from the 2000s this year than I even got of Legacy United figures. And that's a big reason for that is because the prices on these guys are finally starting to come down. But also I've decided that this is what I'm interested in right now, is to go back and get some of those childhood toys I was never able to own. So, there's a whole lot to talk about. There are so many toys right here that in their individual series lists I would put in the top 1, the top 2, the top 3. They might not make it onto this list because you gotta think, some of my favorite toy lines of all time all are jockeying for position right now. So we're just going to have to see who are my top 10 Transformers figures from the decade of the 2000s that I got this year. At number 10, it's the 2007 movie RC. I think that she is still just one of the best looking versions of RC ever. I hate that she didn't appear in the movie because she was supposed to before getting, kind of cut out at the last possible minute, replaced with Ironhide. But I just adore everything about this toy. I love the motorcycle mode. I like her crossbow accessory, though unfortunately I don't have it. And what I really enjoy is the head design. I find a lot of the Baver's designs just don't look good. RC actually still looks like a character. She doesn't just look like, something with knives as a face. I really, really enjoy this RC. It's not my favorite RC of all time, but it's definitely one of. And it's funny because I'm just looking and realizing this list is going to be absolutely inundated with Movie 1 and Unicron Trilogy stuff, but given my interest, that kind of makes sense to me. At number 9, and representing Energon, this is Energon Shock Blast. One of my favorite takes on Shockwave ever. I mean, I just love everything about this guy. The colors, the gun arms. I even like the character in the show of a Shockwave that just has no attempts to hide how much of a psychopath he really is. There is some cool vehicle modes here. I like the tank train. I like the satellite. The only issue is I'm never transforming this guy again. I transformed him for the video, and then someone warned me, yeah, by the way, this figure is known to snap at the waist when you transform him. I got lucky. I'm never doing it again. But it's a shame because this guy is just so beautiful. An amazing take on Shockwave, with possibly my favorite Shockwave head sculpt ever, and a dreamy color scheme. At number 8, it's 2007 movie preview Protoform Optimus Prime. This is my favorite toy of movie Optimus, and it's entirely based on just how nervous he looks. I talked about this in my review, but when you watch that movie, when you watch the scene where the protoforms come down, the fact that they're all scurrying around and look kind of scared, like they're very nervous in that scene, it's the most humanizing part of any of the Bayverse movies to me. Like, these guys are scared, they're on an alien world, they don't know what they're doing, so they're literally just trying to hide until they can find alternate modes. And I love this Optimus for still conveying that. I love the curvature of his body. I like how smooth he looks. I really love his head sculpt with his big eyes, which, by the way, has a lot of homages to the G1 head sculpt on top of that. But it really is just the fact that this is the one time I can think of a movie Optimus, either as a toy or in the movies, actually looking gentle, actually looking kind of soft. And I like that. I love that, actually. This is probably going to be the only 07 Optimus I have for a long while because it's the only one I feel like I need. At least until I can find a Night Watch Optimus, maybe. At number 7, it's Armada Demolisher. If you watch my review, you would know I just couldn't stop myself from laughing and having a good time with him. His gimmicks with the minicons are so well thought out, and yet he's still a really nice action figure in his own right. This design is still entirely his own. There's not another person in Transformers who looks anything like him. I love his very asymmetric face with almost like the Igor eyes. I love his gun fingers. I love his transformation. I love his gimmicks. Even Blackout's pretty cool. Demolisher is a shining light of what Armada figures could be, and at times got to be. There were some that maybe bit off a bit more than they could chew. I'm looking at Sideways. There's some that maybe were just a little bit too simple for their own good. But Demolisher was a perfect marriage of interesting gimmick and still a playable action figure that made one of the best designs in all of Transformers. At number 6, and representing the Parliament of Shockwave, it is, I was about to say Alternator's Shock Blast. One of my absolute favorite Shockwaves ever. I just adore everything about this guy. His Mazda alternate mode, his transformation, his robot mode proportions, his head sculpt, everything. I think that this is a nearly perfect Shockwave, and one of my absolute favorite versions of him. It might be my favorite version of him. I say might because there's a pretty big asterisk coming up. That's the reason why he gets to lead the Parliament, baby. If you've been watching Sunday Shockwave, you know the Parliament of Shockwave has only been growing, and this guy, he's sitting at the front of the table every single time. I just absolutely love this figure. I love everything about it. At number 5, it's Armada Predacon, because of course it is. If you watch my review, I stand by this. One of the best figures of the 2000s is a remold of a figure from the 1990s. Transmetal Megatron has a bad waist. It will snap. This guy doesn't have that problem, and I think he honestly has a better deco. I like Predacon's colors more than the usual Transmetal Megatron. But the real reason he gets to be number 1 is this. Boop, boop, there. He's a cult leader on roller skates, because if you don't know the backstory of Predacon, that's what he is. He has a cult on Cybertron that's trying to usher in the techno-organic. I love this toy. I pull it off my shelf constantly. I play with it constantly. I pose with it constantly. I take photos with it constantly. There was a real chance that this was going to be my number 1. But there's a few toys above it, mostly for nostalgic reasons, that I just can't see being below him. I never wanted Predacon as a kid. I got Predacon as an adult and loved him. It took me by absolute surprise. But sometimes the heart wants what it wants, even though something that's objectively better is right here in front of me. At number 4, the Roosevelt on our Rushmore, this is Animated Shockwave. Now, I still don't really know my full opinions on him yet. There's a reason why I've not reviewed him on Sunday Shockwave. It's because I honestly think I still have too much of a new toy smell with him. I'm worried that I'm just going to gush without being all that critical, which is why I just want to hold off a little bit more, make sure I actually fully understand everything about this guy before I make any review. What I will say is that he means a lot to me because my buddy Avery picked him up for me at TFCon Baltimore. I didn't get to go to TFCon, but he did, and he was on the lookout for this Shockwave. He got it for me that day. First day he arrived, before the convention even began. They found it in just someone's room cell, and I'm incredibly thankful for it. That makes it mean so much to me already, that this was a friend who found this guy. But there's also the fact that I've wanted this Shockwave for my entire life, dude. This is the Shockwave, the first ever Shockwave that I wanted and I asked for and I tried to find and I just never did as a kid. But now I have him. And I know the purple one looks nice, but what I wanted was this gray one. I wanted the most genuine, the most all-encompassing experience, and to me, Animated Shockwave is gray. I know that the purple looks really nice, but the gray is what helps make him feel so unique. And he is. Amongst all Shockwaves, he is one of the most unique. And I love him for it. You got a tank mode, a crane mode, long arm prime, but even just the Shockwave mode itself might be my favorite Shockwave design ever. And I can't get over the fact that I actually own this thing now. From a work of art to just a big dumb monkey, this is the Cybertron Crumple Zone. This is number 3. And you want to know why? It's because he's fun. He's a big, chunky bot. No one's like him. His proportions are perfect. I love this. You look at him, and you just know, yeah, this guy, he's not all that bright. But he is absolutely one of the most interesting and one of the most playable Transformers you will ever come across. I love everything about Crumple Zone. I love the fact that he has a super slick car mode despite being such a big oaf. I love his transformation. I love his gimmick. I love the colors. I love the design. I love the little pieces of Bulkhead you can see in him. Because this guy was about, 4 years older than Bulkhead, but you can start to see some of those ideas maybe take root. I just adore this guy. And for a long time, he was number one on the list. When I actually wrote this list down on paper, he was my number one. But there are two toys that I just can't put below him, and it's entirely for nostalgic reasons. At number 2, it's Armada Thundercracker. My favorite Thundercracker design. One of my favorite Thundercracker toys. The Thundercracker that first even introduced me to Thundercracker. I say it all the time. The first time I ever heard Thundercracker's name is when Starscream uttered the line, "I look like Thundercracker." And of course, I love Armada. Armada is still one of the cornerstones of my fandom. I love the show, I love the toys, I love the designs, and when I think of Thundercracker, this is one of the first looks to come up for me, and I finally own it. Armada Starscream is my favorite Starscream. It's one of my favorite Thundercracker designs, it's one of my favorite toys, it's one of my favorite gimmicks. I love the wing sword. I love everything about this guy. Does he have problems? Yeah. Does he have the best articulation? No. But God, is he beautiful. And check this out. He still has his electronics. That alone makes him number 2. And I guess that just leaves the Woody to my Andy. You knew. Number 1 has to be Cliffjumper. I've said this story so many times. I'm worried that it could come off as cliche at this point, but I still remember getting this guy. It was in 2008, and I got it when me and my dad went on a camping trip. It was the last big time I got to have with my dad. And I still remember the Walmart we went into. I remember why we were there. We were in there because he had forgotten a lantern and because he wanted to grab a chessboard. Well, while we were in there, we swung by the Transformers section, and we saw this guy. And I'd already had Bumblebee. And I was almost scared to ask, because I thought he would say, well, you already have one that looks so much like him. But I think he understood that, when I saw him, I was just enamored with him. He was actually the one to pull him off the shelf and be like, so do you like this one? I was like, yeah, because, this is kind of embarrassing. When we went down the aisle together, little 8-year-old me, I see this red Bumblebee, and I'm just mesmerized. I'm just staring right at it. It's my favorite car mode in all of Transformers. The silver and red Camaro is just a beautiful car mode to me. The transformation's still great. The Automorph works like a charm. He has the best accessory in Transformers, a great-looking gun that you open up, and you get the awesome knife. I love everything about this Cliff. I especially love that he has the little Allspark blue there in his arms. I love his head sculpt. Because you look at him, he still looks really cool, but there's a gentleness to him. I know that that's the Bumblebee sculpt, but with Bumblebee, with so much black and gunmetal gray all around his face, it was hard to actually tell what he's supposed to look like. He looks like a skeleton guy. But then with this Cliffjumper, it actually kind of clicks that he's always just kind of wide-eyed staring around. I'm not objective with this Cliffjumper. I know that this Cliffjumper has problems. I know that most people would not say that this is the best Cliffjumper design or the best Cliffjumper toy of all time, but he is to me. This is the best Cliffjumper of all time to me. This is the best design, this is the best toy, this is the one that means the most to me. In Transformers collecting and toy collecting in general, people ask you all the time, what's your favorite toy? And it's hard to answer that question. I mean, you got so many of them. You got so many that you'll love for different reasons, but there's some that you just can't put your fingers on, but that's the one that meant so much to you. For a long time, that was my Generations War for Cybertron Soundwave, because he carried me through so many hard times. Cliffjumper wasn't there for the hard times. I lost him before the hard times. But having him now, man. It's like that scene from SpongeBob where Squidward is crying because he tries the Krabby Patty for the first time, and he's just, oh, the wasted years! And, it's actually kind of like that. I look at this Cliffjumper and I think, all the wasted years where I didn't have you back, buddy. And it's not because I wasn't looking, I was. It's because I want to get him in the box again. And I want to open him up. And, there's a video I have on my channel that I think is a pretty bad video, all things considered, but it's called Ron Bondajon Rambles Like a Moron About Cliffjumper, I think. And I shot it at my old apartment before I moved, and all my lighting stuff was already gone. It's one of the worst looking videos I ever made. But I rewatched that video recently, and it's so clear. Like, I almost cried a few times. Because I finally had this guy back. I finally had my Cliff back. I say it every time he comes up. This was the Woody to my Andy. This was the favorite toy. This was the toy that didn't get to survive childhood, though. And now that I'm in a better state of mind than I ever have been, now that I'm healthier than I ever have been, now that I'm happier than I ever have been, it only feels right that I was able to find a Cliffjumper now. I'm so happy to have this guy back. I am. I'm so happy to have this guy back. He might be my favorite Transformer of all time. I'm not talking about the character either. I'm talking about this particular toy. He is just the absolute best to me. Bringing that top 3 back in, and I'm never going to try to tell you guys I'm unbiased, right? I'm very aware of where my interests and where my biases are. I love the 2000s era of Transformers. It's what I grew up with, right? I still love all the modern stuff. I like the modern shows. I adore the Skybound comics. I like the toys. But if you were to, strap me down to a chair and put a gun against my head and say, hey, Ron Bondajon, what is the best Transformers cartoon? I'd probably tell you animated or Armada. If you were to do the same and say, what's the best Transformers toy line? I'd probably tell you Armada, the '07 line, or animated. If you were to say, who's the best Transformers riders? I'd probably say guys like Martin Eisenberg, or, any number of people who worked on the animated cartoon. I love so many eras of this franchise, but I'm fully aware where my bread and butter are. It's that 2000s period. And yeah, a lot of these characters are probably never coming back. Crumple Zone, he's probably never coming back. '07 Cliff, he's never coming back. But it's what makes it special, man. It's a thing where you look at people who grew up with G1, right? Well, sure, there was no G1 stuff for a pretty long while, but eventually G1 came back, and now, you can get basically every character that ever appeared in the G1 cartoon. I don't think we're missing anyone anymore. Even Beast Wars. You grew up with Beast Wars, not only do you have third-party options, but you had Kingdom, you have Legacy United, and then if you grew up later on, so many of the designs are so similar to G1 that you can just kind of buy the G1. If your Transformers cartoon was Cyberverse, you could honestly just buy a bunch of G1 toys for most of those characters. And it kind of feels like there's this forgotten generation of Transformers, and that's like the Unicron Trilogy kids, the animated kids, the '07 movie kids, Prime as well. I would lump Prime in with this group, where it's like you get almost no third party, you get almost no recognition from the official side of things, and it feels like that makes these designs and this love we have for them all the more special. The idea that, hey, they might not ever come back. In this weird ocean of nostalgia, the cool ideas, the revolutionary ideas, maybe they stay behind. And that kind of makes me love them even more. I don't want to say it's a gatekeeping thing. No. I hope anyone who would ever want to experience these toys or these shows get a chance to. But that experience of growing up with it, I don't think that can ever be replicated. And in some ways, that makes me both sad and kind of happy. There's so many Transformers fans out there, and I love talking to so many of them. But it's the ones that kind of grew up in that same era that I did. The ones who remember Armada. The ones that remember the '07 movie line. And were kids at the time, specifically. Those are always kind of the most special conversations to me. But hey, that's the beautiful thing about our fandom. We're getting bigger. We're having more and more diversity of ideas, diversity of entry points, and that makes Transformers better. It does. It makes it better. And I'm so happy to see our fandom in the spot it is today. And I hope it just keeps getting even bigger and even better and even more full of weird ideas and crazy people and, well, plenty of people who are going to blow all their money on big dumb robots because, damn it, life's not worth living without the big dumb robots. But on that note, guys, I had a pretty good year of collecting. We got a lot more top 10s to do, but I think you've probably caught on. This is definitely the list that probably means the most to me. And it's due in no small part to that big, beautiful red boy right there. Just having that Cliffjumper in my life makes me happy. Seeing him on my shelf makes me happy. Sometimes life is pretty cool.